Chainsaw routine maintenance, or what happens when you skip it. Right, the name on this saw does not apply. It was taken over when this gentleman left by another gentleman who's just left the firm I'm working for today. So it's come in for me to have a look at it before it goes out in general circulation. So first impressions, it's filthy. The user hasn't even been bothered to wipe the outside down. It's got a brand new chain on it, and that is brand new, never been sharpened, and yet it's bagging off the bar. There's a big burr on the bottom of the bar, and you can see here bar nose is eroded, and you see the bar has been changed, still is upside down. It's also eroded here. Basically this bar is knackered. It started chucking lumps of itself out at the world in general. It's generally not been maintained at all. Turning round, look at the other side, and you can immediately see he's had a chain off, which is not surprising if he's been running it with the chain slack all the time, and it's bent the chain catcher, and you see damage on it, and the gap here is much wider than it should be. So let's get into it and see what we can find. Up inside, filthy, not been maintained, and in here filthy, and the air filter's choked. See the amount of crap in it? It's all in the bottom of the valleys, and if you do this, which is what you should do each time you use your saw, is at the very least knock out the air filter. If you look inside, find a clean bit of blue roll, and then poke the blue roll inside. Got a little bit of oil build up, but there's not too much crap made its way through the air filter and into the inlet tract. And if we look under here, see what we can find. Notice I've loosened these beforehand because I knew I'd be working with one hand, showing you what's going on. Sorry about the commentary in the background. Not been cleaned out for quite a long time, and you can see all the dirt on this face here and on this face here. Every time you disturb this, you should change this, otherwise you won't get it to pull down nicely and accurately, and you should be cleaning out this oil delivery hole. Burrs here, burrs here. These again are caused by a loose chain, and the chain being run habitually loose. You should maintain your correct chain tension at all times. This is also a symptom of a loose chain. This cover plate here has been eroded away, and you've got damage here on the main crankcase. So it looks like the user's been changing his chain regularly, but not maintaining anything else on the saw. Got a lot of play here, and it may well be that the user hasn't been maintaining his clutch bearing. So we'll pop this out. Worn sprocket. Take that off. And see the sprocket's so worn that the drive links have protruded through the base of the sprocket, and they've made these detents in between the splines. And if we look in here, you can just about see or here, but this is very, very rough. Started to spoil off. Bearing is showing signs of bluing, and the crank is also showing bluing. So it's up to each individual chainsaw user to maintain their saw. This bearing here, you saw how I took it off, should be greased weekly when the saw is in use every day. If you are cutting dead wood or very dry wood, then it should be greased more frequently. Basically, it's the design fault on these saws that under frequent heavy use they don't get enough lubrication from the splash and the chain oiling. If you damage your chain catcher, replace it. There are replacements available in the centre unit. If you damage this thing here, replace that. There are also replacements available. There's replacement clutch drums, that's the clutch drum, available in the centre unit. Basically, by not maintaining this saw, you're putting yourself at risk, or the user has put himself at risk, and also anybody else who uses this saw. It's also not as productive as he should be, and he's costing the firm money by this happening. Thank you very much. Hope that makes sense. Right, a little bit more on MS362 number 9, which we're checking over after it's been handed in by someone who's left the firm. This is what was in the fuel tank. I'll shake that up a bit, and you can see that it's absolutely full of fine grit and particulate material and sawdust. This is basically carelessness when fueling, and repeated carelessness when fueling. The idea is to keep your fuel clean so that these particles don't make their way into the fuel filter and then potentially make their way into the carburetor. That can be an expensive repair, especially if it comes all the way through the carburetor. It messes up the fuel air mixture and also the auto tune on these modern saws, and finally potentially takes out the rear face of the piston, and also potentially the main bearings on the crank. Right, and this is how you take this shield off. One small screw here. This screw here, of course, is the chain tensioner, and this thing, the chain catcher, comes off here. This is as clean as this needs to be when the guide bar goes back on, except the guide bar that came off will not be going back on, because with this amount of erosion this would be borderline unsafe, if not outright unsafe. It's likely there's a lot of wear in these rails, so the chain, even a brand new one like this one, if it's either the least bit blunt, say on the cutters on one side, it's going to cut in a curve. So the bar that's going to go back on is going to be this one, which someone, again, you can see here, has run a blunt chain on it when it was in this orientation, but this side is excellent. This has been dressed and re-gapped, which can be done, and this should be used from now on this way up. And if the chain tension is maintained, this should last a good 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And also light maintenance on the bar, consisting of use of a flat file to take off any bars that form, any burrs that form as they form. There'll also be a brand new clutch and bearing, and possibly, because there's some evidence of bluing here, and if you look at the clutch drum, you can see bluing here, This means it's been rubbing and it's got hot. And this will all be changed before it goes out to the next user. There'll also be some examination of these jobbies, which are the anti-vibration mounts. Thank you very much, hope that's useful. Right, MS362 number 9 again. Basically keeping this area here clean of material, basically maintaining that every time you sharpen your chain, which should be done every time it needs doing before it gets completely blunt, or at least daily. Stops this build up of this material here. You see, this is the same sort of crap builds up, fall through here and underneath the side cover, which we've now cleaned. And if it builds up to extreme, it means that the chain brake, which works like this, cannot operate and cannot return properly. You can also get material built up in this space under here, and this may be the cause of this bluing you see here and the bluing on the clutch drum. So routine maintenance done correctly will save a lot of issues with the saw, because of course if the chain brake fails, it's going to fail when you really need it, sod's law being what it is, and you're going to end up being hurt. MS362 number 9, all back together. Number 9 is actually number 6. So anyway, got a new one of these. So it's a new shield plate, new chain catcher, replacement bar, same chain because it's brand new, new clutch drum, new sprocket, new retaining washer and circlip, and in here got new buffers. This one, although the previous owners had a chain off, taken some damage, it's not severe. And you'll notice this is the old style sprocket cover, which is absolutely fine. So we'll just nip him up. I'll tension that properly off camera and give the thing a test run. I want to do that so the thing doesn't fall to bits. New brake band's gone in, that's the old one. And if you can see just here, just in front of my thumbnail, notice it's thin. Because it's been rubbing, it's probably had debris in behind it. So that will weaken the brake band. So potentially, if it's triggered at high revs, it might potentially let go. So that's scrap. That's the chain catcher. You see the bend on it. That should be straight all the way across the bottom. And if we look back in here, you can now see there's a very small gap in between the side cover, the chain catcher. So if the chain does have an off, it can't come up here, swing back and potentially hit your backhand. New clutch drum's been fitted, that's the old one. New sprocket, new bearing, and that's how it looks now, with literally 5 minutes cleaning the outside. Looks like a much more professional machine. So routine maintenance, do it. You'll make the machine much more pleasant to use, you'll be more efficient, and you'll have to work less hard. Right, number 6 is back on the road. Chain correctly tensioned, and if you notice there's a little bit of rock of the chain in the rails, and you can pull it with significant, resistance in this direction. So this is correctly tensioned. Little note, when you put a new chain on an old bar, or you put a new chain on any bar, each of these individual bearings in here And there's 60 links in this chain for a 16-inch guide bar. Each of those, so it's 60 times 4. 4 6s are 32, so that's 320 individual bearings in this chain. Each of those will need bedding in. So your new chain, even on a brand new bar with a brand new sprocket, will go slack. If you're putting it on a slightly worn bar like this one, it will go slack even more. So before working your saw, run the chain in and just run it for sort of 5 minutes and then retension. Run it again and then retension, so the tension stays correct, and then you can work it. If you work it straight off and it goes slack, and it goes significantly slack, you'll erode your guide bar like this, and it's more likely to jump off. If it jumps off, you're more likely to get hurt. Thank you very much.